Hey everyone, welcome. If we haven't met before, I'm Rebecca Pickens. I'm a certified book coach and developmental editor and host of Self-Editing Essentials, a group coaching program for writers who have finished or almost finished writing their books and are ready to learn the art of self-editing. If you like what you hear today, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel every Tuesday, and I would love to have you here. So oftentimes when people bring me their manuscripts to edit, one of the things they have questions about is the length of the chapters they've written. So I thought today would be a great day to go ahead and look at the structure of a chapter. What makes a chapter propulsive? What gives it good form that keeps readers reading? So first, I want to talk about the chapter's job. Chapters are a lot more than just page breaks, right? I think we tend to think of chapters sometimes as a place to rest and pause, more at the service of the reader than at the service of the story you're trying to tell. So I want you to get out of that way of thinking because they are so much more than strategic page breaks. They are really the way that you construct and shape your story so that your readers have a very specific experience, an experience that you, the writer, are in charge of. So chapters help us manage our attention and our expectation. When a chapter is well crafted and when it is coming before and after other chapters have been similarly shaped and sized, you are creating a certain rhythm, a certain set of expectations for your reader. That is the difference between kind of a bumpy read and one that readers just become wholly immersed in. Chapters shape how we accumulate our understanding of what is happening in the story. It's the way that you kind of dispense the amount of details that your reader gets at any given time. A chapter is also a container that helps organize everything that you need your reader to understand in a given space. And chapters can also be very strategic in helping us shift time. So if you want to show that some time has elapsed, whether it be an hour, a day, or a decade, a good chapter break can help you accomplish that. Chapters help with pacing, tension, and they help us know where to focus our attention as readers. There are some very common misconceptions that I see over and over again that I've held myself about chapters in the past. And the first one of those is that chapters must be uniform in length. So sometimes I will actually receive a manuscript where every chapter is exactly the same size. And it's not necessarily that these chapters were divvied up in a way that was strategic and helped increase tension or suspense. Instead, they've been put in these containers so that they all look the same, so that there's some sort of cohesion in terms of how they look on the page. But that's not necessary, and oftentimes that's not even optimal. There's also this notion that every single chapter needs to be a cliffhanger. That very much depends on the genre that you're writing. You can look at mentor texts in the writing that you're interested in pursuing and get a sense of if that's necessary or not. Um, in a thriller, we will often see that, right? In a lot of YA novels, you end a chapter with some suspense. But there are many other genres, literary fiction, upmarket fiction, where that's not necessarily the case and would even actually feel a little bit formulaic. There's also a thought sometimes that short chapters only belong in fast-paced stories, maybe genre fiction, and that they don't have a place in other forms of more literary fiction. And that's also not the case. So I have had far too many conversations with writers who are stressing themselves out, worrying about making sure that the chapter is the right length. I want to assure you there is no correct length. Chapters can be a few paragraphs, they can be many pages. This is true again across many different genres. What matters is how the length of the chapter that you craft impacts the pace of your story and in turn how it engages your reader and makes them feel like they're moving forward. Chapters, of course, do provide a natural break for the reader to go and get another cup of coffee or turn out the light for the night, but they do so much more. They highlight shifts in narrative perspective. You can think about it as a movie camera. Chapter 4, you may be shining the light on one character or one particular theme. Chapter 5, that may be a different shift to somewhere else. You may even change point of view, character point of view at this point. Chapters, like I said, are very integral in helping control the rhythm and the suspense and the tension in your story. And chapters can be used to reinforce themes or to highlight certain aspects of character development because they're isolated in a singular container where you can really take a more granular look at what's happening. One of the important things is to make sure that every chapter you write has a purpose and that you understand what the purpose is. It should have a clear role in your story, and it will vary in length and rhythm in order to reflect whatever it is you're trying to reflect in that moment. So this conversation can get a little confusing because we can start to sometimes think about chapters and scenes as almost the same thing. I see this happen a lot, and they actually are quite distinctive. Probably the simplest way to think about this is scenes are about what happens. Chapters are about how what happens, the meaning of what happens, is actually grouped together. So a chapter could have multiple scenes and a scene might span multiple chapters. The key takeaway here is that a scene is all about dramatic action, and a chapter is all about the experience that you are giving the reader in that moment based on how you've organized that information, how you've contained it in that single chapter. So a scene, when we think about scenes, there are certain dramatic mechanics that we really have to think about, right? And they're pretty universal. We see this pattern in lots of writing. The first is the character wants something, but it encounters resistance or an obstacle. There's some sort of hurdle in the way. Then the character takes action to get past that hurdle. And as a result, something changes. They'll have success, failure, a brand new complication, some kind of an epiphany. This is the framework of a successful scene. A good scene asks, what happened here that altered the situation? How is my character different than they were at the beginning of the scene? A chapter, on the other hand, is governed by narrative framing and how it is that you organize information so that the reader is able to understand whatever it is you want to share with them. So when you're thinking about crafting a chapter, you want to ask yourself, how much meaning, how much information do you want to give your reader all at once in this one container? Which events belong together, right? So what events are going to talk to each other and will be more meaningful if they're side by side than if they were separated in a different chapter? Where should reflection or suspense occur? And how are you using your chapter to make that happen? Conceptual unit has been completed is also a good question. You probably feel this all the time when you're writing. You do come sometimes to a natural conclusion where it just feels like, yeah, this is wrapped up nicely. We can call this a day. That might be the end of your chapter. When we think about a chapter, we can think about the boundaries, right? And primarily, where does a chapter end? We want to think carefully about that. Because chances are your reader is going to sometimes stop at the end of the chapter and put the book away for the evening. So we want to make sure that this is a very strategic ending point. So some of the different ways that you might decide, oh, this is a good place to end. One is you have a thematic beat landing, right? You've hit that point, you've illustrated whatever it is you wanted to share. This is a great place to end. It may be that your character has a new shift in understanding, and to show what led up to that understanding, the shift and the consequences all in one chapter, that's a lot. That's a lot for a reader to absorb. So it makes good sense that when that shift occurs, you pause there and you move on to the next chapter. And we can see the consequences in that following chapter or maybe a few chapters later, depending on the structure of your story. A reframing of stakes can also be a very good place to end. If suddenly Something has really shifted in the character's life, and the stakes have just gotten much higher. Let's end there with a little bit of suspense and some tension that will make us want to read the next chapter. Sometimes there's just simply a meaningful pause point. Everybody finished dinner and separated. Everybody, somebody went to the living room, somebody went upstairs, somebody else is going out on a date. They say everybody says goodnight to each other. That's just a logical pause point and can be a nice, tidy way to end a chapter. And finally, if you are going to do some sort of a structural contrast where maybe you are in one character's point of view in chapter 3 and you're going to shift point of view to chapter 4, these are logical places to break. If you have a dual timeline, once you have finished timeline A, when you go into timeline B, that's a perfect place to start a new chapter. So sometimes the structure that you are working with just requires very clear places where the chapters need to end. So, a good question to ask yourself when you're really drilling down on a chapter, making sure it's beginning and ending at the right place and that the right information is contained, is asking yourself, what does my reader need to know right here, right now? What facts about my characters are going to work together most persuasively, most in the most compelling way possible if they fit inside this container together? So sometimes a chapter will contain multiple scenes, and this is one of the reasons it really is helpful to understand the difference between a chapter and a scene, because you will see chapters that contain more than one scene, and you want to understand what's going on there. The reason that this can be helpful is because multiple dramatic moments can form a single unit of meaning. So if there are three scenes that inform your protagonist, in a variety of ways about the same thing, it's going to be really interesting to see that all in one container. For example, let's imagine that your protagonist has just started dating someone, and that person on the surface seems pretty great. But then your protagonist goes to the office place to pick up this person for lunch. And along the way, she talks to his office assistant, and maybe she talks to the janitor and a couple other people. And she's starting to get these different vibes about this person she's going to have lunch with. Maybe it's some offhanded comments. Maybe someone actually warns her about this person. Any number of things could happen. But these could be different scenes that on their own may just feel like a coincidence or not so significant, but when clustered together, give us a profile of this person she's about to have lunch with. And suddenly, maybe danger is ramped up, or we feel some kind of apprehension about who this person is she's about to go have lunch with. So clustering different scenes together for more impact can be very effective. And in that case, a single chapter could contain these scenes. So, for example, we have a character argues with their partner, a character receives bad news, and the character makes a risky decision. These are three different scenes, but they could all work together structurally in a chapter about instability, right? About everything kind of coming undone. So these work together because they're all working to support one interpretive arc that is interesting to follow. On the other hand, sometimes the opposite is the case. A scene may actually span the chapter breaks. So instead of having several scenes within one chapter, you have a scene that stretches across a couple of chapters. So it's almost the opposite function. So some instances where you may find this helpful is if you are trying to delay an outcome. So imagine you're writing a court case drama, for example, and you really want to stretch out that tension and that suspense. We may have to wait. We may have to read two chapters in order to find out what that verdict is going to be. In the meantime, you, the writer, are just stretching out that tension, raising those stakes as we take a look at the different people involved, as we're looking at the expressions on their faces or perhaps what they're whispering to each other. We are part of that scene, completely immersed, waiting and waiting to find out what the verdict will be. And so that extra time that can elapse between two different chapters can be highly effective. We may do this technique to emphasize a turning point. If your character is going through something dramatic, complicated, emotional, it just may be that that a single chapter cannot contain all the nuance, all the different big feelings that that particular moment involves. Um, Again, we can force a pause before a consequence. So you're playing with that pacing and that tension. And it can also be that you want to maybe cover the same moment, but you want to do it from a different point of view, in which case you will probably want to start a brand new chapter so that we are clear that the point of view has shifted and we're not doing head hopping. But we're we're still in that moment, but we're hearing it from somebody different. So let's look at an example of what I mean by all of this, because it's a little confusing. So imagine a continuous scene timeline. You've got a fight. There's an escalation as a result. Somebody gets hurt. Then there's a reversal where someone takes control. Maybe the tables turn. Somebody starts to uh, work on their escape, and they escape. What that looks like, that's the scene. What that could look like if you were splitting a scene into more than one chapter. Chapter 12, the fight begins, there's an escalation. Then we move on to chapter 13, where the consequence is shown. There's an injury, there's a reversal, and an escape. You have one big scene full of lots of tension and drama and change, but putting it out into two chapters just really helps smooth the pacing, give the reader more time to absorb what's happening, and it gives you, the writer, more time to dig into all that detail that will make your writing so riveting. So I've put together this chapter checklist, and you can use this when you come to the end of a chapter just to test the structure of your chapter, make sure you've accomplished what you set out to do. The first thing to think about is the purpose and function of your chapter. Does it have a clear narrative purpose? In other words, can you name what your chapter is doing? Not what happens in your chapter, but what its function is in your story. For example, is it advancing plot? Is it deepening your character? Is it sharpening a theme of some kind? And then be thinking about the structural integrity. Is there a coherent unit of meaning here, right? We talked about picking aspects of your story that are complements of each other and braiding them together inside a single container, which is your chapter, because they complement each other well. Do the events belong together interpretively? Does one event in a chapter reinforce another event inside your chapter? And should any part be split or merged with another chapter? And that is often going to really just be sort of an intuitive thing. Put yourself in the shoes of your reader and think about what it feels like to read this story. This will help you kind of recognize where those natural pauses live, where it might be a good place for your brain to kind of shut down and say, okay, I get what just happened. This is a natural resting place. I think empathy with the reader, thinking about their experience, can be a very helpful way to think about when a chapter should close. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, please hit subscribe. I drop videos like this every Tuesday, and I would love if you came back for them. And finally, I would just love to invite you to Story Circle. This is my free writing group. We meet every week together on Zoom, and we just write together for an hour. It's so much fun. It's super casual. You come when you can. It's all right if you come late. It's all right if you come sometimes, but we would love to see you there. If you would like to join me, there's a link in the comments section so you can subscribe and get all the news about this circle. All right, everyone, happy writing.